Hello everyone. In this video, we will see what is time complexity and how to calculate time complexity. The time complexity of an algorithm is the amount of computer time it needs to run to completion. That is, we can calculate time complexity by checking how much time requires to an algorithm to execute. So basically, by checking how many steps are there in the algorithm, we can decide the time complexity. We can determine the number of steps needed by an algorithm to solve a particular problem in two different ways. First one is global variable. In this method, we introduce a new variable, that is count, into the algorithm. This is a global variable with initial value 0. Statements to increment count by the appropriate amount are introduced into the program. This is done so that each time a statement in the original program is executed, count is incremented by the step of that statement. Now we will take one example and we will see how to calculate the complexity by using global variable. So this is the simple algorithm where we are taking two parameters, that is a and n. So a is array and n is the use for size of the array. So starting, we are initialize s by 0, and then in the for loop starting from 1 to n, we are repeating the statement, and the statement in the for loop is s equal to s plus a of I. So basically we are adding value stored in array into the s, and finally we are returning the value s. So now we will see how to calculate the time complexity of this particular algorithm. So this is the algorithm, same algorithm. So here we will introduce one variable, that is global variable, and we will count the time complexity of this particular algorithm. So here the variable, that is global variable count, is initialized to 0 at the beginning. Now we will count number of steps that will be executed in this particular algorithm. So for the first step, that is algorithm sum, this is just a algorithm name, so this will not be executed, just a normal instruction, so this will not be counted in the time complexity. Even the second, that is opening flower bracket of algorithm, this will not be counted. The next statement, that is s equal to 0. So here we are initializing s by 0. That means we are performing one step. So for that we have to consider one step. So in count we can add that step. So here count will become count plus 1. That means basically we are taking for s equal to 0 as one step. After that, the next statement that will be executed is that for loop. So it starts from I equal to 1 to n. So this for loop will repeat it how much time? N times. So that is, we will take increment operator for counting in the for loop. So this count will be repeated how many times? N times. Next, in that there is another statement in the for loop, that is s equal to s plus a of I. So this loop, that is this statement is also repeated how many times? N times. So for that also we will take another count statement. So this count statement is for s equal to s plus a of I. So this statement is also repeated n number of times. After completing the for loop, once the condition becomes false, that means even after completing n number of steps, we are checking for the next step, that is n plus 1 times. So at that time the condition becomes false. So even that step is also executed. For that we have to take one more count statement. So suppose I is equal to 1 and n is equal to 10. So after 10 completion of for loop, 11th time the condition becomes false. So that 11th time also we have to consider as one step. So for that again we have to increment count by 1. And finally for return statement, we are executing return statement one time. So for that also count plus 1 has to be included. So the same algorithm we have written in different way to calculate the number of steps. So first count statement is for s equal to 0. Then the second count statement is for loop that will be repeated n number of times. The third count statement is for s equal to s plus a of I. Again that also be repeated n number of times. Then for the false statement of for loop, we have to consider one statement, means even when the condition becomes false, that time also we are calculating. So that step has to be included. So the fourth step is for false condition of for loop, and the last, that is fifth count statement, is for returning value s. So now again we will simplify this algorithm so that we can easily calculate time complexity of this particular algorithm. So now we will just take count statements. So how many count statements we are including, that will be means that algorithm we will write. So this is the algorithm. So now if you see in the red color, there are 3 count statements, and that count statements are executed only once. So we can, instead of writing 3 separate count statement, we can consider that as a single count, but we are executing 3 times. That means we can write that statement as count plus 3. So in count we are adding 3 steps. Next, in for loop we are executing count statement 2 times. So in for loop we will write the same statement, instead of 2 separate we will write in single statement. So basically in for loop, how many times we are executing the count statement? 2 times. So instead of writing 2 separate count statement, we will write single statement, because we are taking 2 count statements. So that's why count equal to count plus 2. So now the simplified algorithm is that for counting number of steps, the third algorithm we have written, that is in for loop we are repeating count plus 2 statement n number of types. So instead of writing that count plus 2, we will simplify that statement to calculate time complexity. So count statement we are repeating how many times in the for loop? N times. So that will become 2n, and the last count statement, that is count plus 3, we are repeating, means we are executing that 1 time, but we are adding 3 steps into the count. So the final time complexity of this particular algorithm will become 2n plus 3. So this is the time complexity for this particular algorithm. So in for loop we are means we are adding 2 into the count how many times? N times. So that's why 2n plus 3. So next remaining 3 statements, that is we are adding into the count. So how many times? 3 times. So 2n plus 3, that will be the time complexity for this algorithm. So the same calculation for this particular algorithm or any algorithm we can do in another way, that is by using table, and we will see that steps in the next session.